levels of your mind that are guiding, influencing, providing openings for levels of your mind down here in physical embodiment. So, higher self generally and most commonly manifests as a voice. This is the common thing that most people describe um, during a critical moment or uh, during a very important event in their lives. They just had this feeling or knowing or even a little whisper that said, hey, this is a dangerous person. Like, don't go here. Or a door was opened that really, really came out of the blue. So when we refer to guidance or spirit, um, it's a mystery, right? So the point of this series and my work in this particular vein is to help you begin to directly contact that North Star, that level of your consciousness that is uh, guiding you here. So from the ultimate point of view, or like from the consciousness perspective, if we want to call it, like everything is just happening and everything is perfected. So from this view, we wouldn't use the term destiny or being or self or person. Like it's just all the field, right? This is the view we find in Buddhism and Vedanta. But from the lived experience of actually being a person or being under the impression of being a person, there is a path for your life. And I used to not really buy this, I was like, oh, there's probably no such thing as destiny. It's probably something people make up so they can feel better about themselves, right? I mean, that's a logical conclusion you could make. But once I made it to the mainframe, it became really clear. It was like, oh, yeah, like there's things you're supposed to do. There's things that you wanted to do before you incarnated. There's things that you plan to do, people you plan to meet, spiritual systems and teachers that you plan to encounter before you were born. And if a person misses out on that, there's a price to pay, right? There's a sense sometimes, I mean, some of you can probably relate that you're supposed to move in a certain direction. And if you don't move in that direction, like your life gets really heavy. Things start to go wrong, like things don't work out. You start to have regret. You start to feel, hey, maybe I made the wrong decision here. Maybe I took a wrong path. I mean, I felt that way. I felt that it's like life was moving in this direction, and then like I just took a detour, and that detour lasted a real long time, and it was like I almost forgot that I was on a detour and that there was this original thing that I was on before, right? So this original thing, this destiny, is exactly what is talked about in Vedic astrology, Western astrology, human design, I Ching, tarot. All of these divination systems and different philosophies are for this particular thing we call destiny. And I'm defining destiny as just the way that your incarnation could unfold that is highest for your spiritual development. All of you here are you're on the same page with me already, that like life isn't about just like making a bunch of money or getting all the fancy cars or going on vacations as many times as you can. And that's all fine, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just saying that it seems there's more than just enjoying things or than just struggling and the day-to-day issues that everyone is faced with. There's a higher purpose. That particular purpose, it seems, is different for each person. And that particular map or that particular layout is what exists in this mainframe, and it's what the higher self guides have been directing you towards. A really good example of this particular aspect or area of consciousness is in the life of Robert Monroe. So if no one's read if any of you haven't finished the Journeys trilogy or haven't started, I highly recommend it. Robert Monroe started having OBEs, out of body experiences, in the 1950s. So at the time, he thought he was losing his mind. He was an engineer, telecommunications entrepreneur. I guess, yeah, he said no one talked about this stuff in the 50s, and if you did, everyone thought you were crazy. So the whole first book is him trying to come to terms and figure out if he's actually lost his mind. Like, he really doesn't know. So he gets all these psychological evaluations, psychiatric evaluations, medical evaluations. It turns out he's sane. And so he begins to feel like, hey, okay, if this isn't going to kill me, then, what is it? He gets curious. And curiosity is really the fuel of the spiritual search. We have this calling to begin to discover the answers, what it is that we're here to do. What is this whole earth life learning system really about? In Bob's second book, he turns over his OBEs to, he gets this sense that something's guiding them. So he turns it over to that. Like in an out of body experience, you can place your, you can see in your attention or your mind's eye a specific area or location, and you'll actually go there. Now, what's not clear is how you go there, or like what is pushing you there, how or what is behind consciousness as it moves, or you as it moves from one plane to another. In Far Journeys, it turns it over to, he calls it total self. He stops directing his OBEs as far as like exploring the physical world is concerned. He just hands it over to, I've explored the whole physical plane. I don't know what's next. I don't know what to do. I just pass it on to you, higher self, total self. And his OBEs take on a completely different, I mean, like, it becomes like space opera stuff. And in the third book, then he really questions, what is driving this? So in lucid dreams and in out of body states, that is a question that really starts to creep on you. I mean, there's probably dreams where the external environment, at least this happened for me, it's probably happened for some of you as well, the external environment is shifted or changed in a way that makes you lucid. Or something happens inside the dream, like someone presses a button and suddenly you're lucid and you're catapulted into an out-of-body experience, and some profound thing happens. But it wasn't your conscious mind that pushed the button. And it wasn't your conscious mind that catapulted you into this cosmic state or into some higher plane of reality. So down here, we're physical. In the dream state, we're still more so physically oriented. You still have your body. If you ever looked in a mirror in a dream, you still appear as yourself. But as you go deeper into these planes, the physicalness and qualities, experiential qualities that you're used to, begin to vanish. I never, ever, ever would have suspected that at this higher self plane, it would appear computerized, right? I mean, my background is Buddhism and deities and Tibetan Buddhism. So you would expect like some kind of deity structure or, Pure Land thing that's described in all the texts and all the yoga literature, but that's not what I encountered at all. It was completely different from my expectations. So Focus 12 is really just a frequency that you put on these headphones, you play this track, and it drives your brain into a state where accessing and contacting guidance is possible and more likely to occur. So the focus levels are just arbitrary terms for different brain states or states of consciousness. So focus 10 is called mind awake, body asleep. That means if you've ever heard yourself snoring, that's focus 10. If you've ever had involuntary hand movement while falling asleep or twitching, you're in the focus 10 territory. If you ever had hypnagogia, so like that's very vivid images as you're falling asleep, like dreamlike, that's all focus 10 territory. Mind awake, body asleep. If you've ever entered a lucid dream consciously from the waking state, that means you passed through focus 10 and you appeared in the dreamscape. Focus 12 is really this place in consciousness where the messages from guidance are more accessible or perceivable. So how we would use this meditation is really to just have the intention to receive a message, an image, anything. Or you can just not do anything and see what happens. It's really up to you. It's open-ended. When I had the experience on the couch here, I didn't have any kind of intention. I just put it on. That's what occurred. So the other aspect of focus 12 is something called creating an access point. So this is a place in your imagination where you have a conversation or where you contact a manifestation of your higher self. So initially it is pretending you're imagining this location. But from this place that you're imagining, it's possible to get information that you didn't expect to come through. So for example, when I did focus 12 a couple times, I was imagining that I was speaking with one of these beings that I've met inside the mainframe. But I lost consciousness, and then a message came through in the form of a text message. Like imagine you dreamed of a text message. There's just no phone, but this like green thing shows up and there's words, right? So the kind of communication you're looking for can happen when your attention lapses. And that's really the key to some of these states. I mean, the idea is like, oh, like I'm making this up, right? Like I have to be making this up. But when your consciousness lapses or your attention lapses, it's possible for some actual non-contrived information or experience to come through. In creating your access point, you just create a place in your imagination where you're talking with any, could be a guide that you've had contact with or a dream character, or you can just say, guidance, higher self, appear however you'd like to, and see where things go from there. Imagination and pretending, our culture is like really against it, especially the more scientific or left-brained we are. We really like don't use the imagination or this idea of pretending. It's really frowned upon. Tom Campbell gave a good example of how it works. So what Tom does to have an OBE is pretty unusual. He'll imagine that he's in like a park that he's created and all of his favorite stuff is there, like all the things that he likes to do, fishing, jet skiing. It's like an amusement park. And so you're going through this self-created amusement park and you start having conversations with people. And at first the conversation is like totally intentional on both ends. Like you're pretending you're creating the conversation on both ends. So like I'm talking to David, I'm like, David, how are you doing? And then I'm like making David say stuff to me. David's like, oh, I'm doing great, Ryan, blah, blah, blah. I was looking into this and into that. And I was like, yeah, meditation's great, man. Try this, blah, blah. And then Dave was like, I discovered this thing, and it's going really well. And so I'm controlling the conversation on both sides. And then at some point, information starts to come through from David that's not my conscious mind. Like he starts to say things that I didn't make him say, right? So this is when we really start, when the imagination really becomes more activated, we could say, and more information from guidance is able to come through. So